Hi guys, my name's Molly. I'm coming to you from my iPhone in Denver, Colorado. Danielle asked me if I could share a little bit of my story and my passion for fashion with you all. So I'm going to do that, and I'm really honored that you want to hear it. I met Danielle when I was in high school, and I did SSTs, and I'm so thankful I did those because I feel like they really changed the trajectory of my life, kind of in a huge way. I always grew up loving art and fashion, and I actually remember being like certain places where I was in my house when I felt like God said, I made you to be an artist. That's a good thing. And then I was just always thinking about clothes. And I also started thinking, like, man, this is really materialistic. Like, maybe I don't need to think about this so much. And then I felt like I heard really clearly God say, "This, I made you to do this. It's okay. It's good." And He's been really faithful to kind of show me how to do that in a way that honors Him. Um, and so when I graduated high school, I really wanted to go to school for fashion and be a cool world-class fashion designer. Yeah. But I felt really uneasy about it. And I just felt like God said no and to wait, which was really hard and frustrating because once you get out of high school, you want to go do something, you want to run around. And instead, I came into DTS in Tyler. And that was in 2009. And basically, I was with YWAM for about 5 years. Tyler, Australia, and then I was on staff here in Denver. And through the course of my time in YWAM, I felt like God really opened my eyes to the fact that there are a lot of people around the world who could maybe in some way benefit from this passion for fashion. I feel like that's a really cheesy phrase, but I keep saying it. That I have. And so I guess my dream was always to work with women coming out of the sex industry and helping them transition, into whatever other kinds of occupation they would want to be involved in through like vocational training. And for me, that meant sewing and fashion. I didn't know how to sew. I was bad at it. I feel like I didn't have the patience. But it was always something in the back of my mind, like, I think this is what I want to do, but it just wasn't time yet. And then one of the last outreaches I led was to Cambodia. And the first night we were there, I met a woman who was working in one of the brothels. And it was her first night there as well, like her first night doing that. And she told me her story about how she had a son who needed providing for, and her boyfriend was a pretty awful guy, and he was basically pimping her and saying, like, your son, like, you're taking care of your son, and this is the only way he's going to be taken care of, and so you have to do this. And she didn't want to be there. And over the course of the month, I saw her go from like really resisting it to kind of like accepting her fate. And at the same time, we were there working with a ministry that was helping women transition out of that work through sewing training. And they had a house where they could house 5 women, and they did training and also like discipleship classes and just a lot of like restorative work. But they were booked to capacity, and they didn't have the finances or the manpower basically to take in more women. And it was like it being in that really weird place of like having like developed a relationship with someone who could have very much benefited from that program, and knowing that program couldn't accept more women because they didn't have enough people to help. That was kind of like the jolt that kind of put me on the path to where I am today. And I just felt like God said, if you want to do something about this, it's going to need to be more long-term than just a 2-month outreach. And so I moved home to Austin, and I started studying fashion design, and I worked for a fair trade company and just kind of learned all about that world. And long story short, I started my own business called The Simple Kind, and we make dresses for little girls and soon to be dresses for women as well. and our heart is just to empower women, because, man, you can read just data upon data and statistics that when women are empowered financially, it affects communities and it affects society, and it really does a lot to break the cycle of poverty that keeps injustice rolling. And so I went into this whole thing with the perception that, oh, I want to help women transition out of the sex industry. But since I started my business, I've traveled to about 10 countries just purely for research, and trying to understand this thing more, because I think it's really unwise to say, I have an idea that's going to help the world, when I haven't actually been there or heard what's actually going on. And so we've just been trying to listen. And what I've found is that in places where garment industries are a really big, really common, where clothing export is one of the biggest structures of a country's economy, these countries are usually pretty poor, and what happens is garment factories, a lot of people say, oh, sweatshops, they're helping lift the economy, they're giving people jobs, even if they're not great jobs, they're giving people jobs, but actually they're keeping people poor, because they're eliminating other options, and they're making it really hard for the cycles of poverty to be broken. Like, parents who work in garment factories don't make enough to provide for their family in a month, and so children will end up dropping out of school and doing whatever they can to help make ends meet. And so as I started learning these things, it became apparent to me that not just prostitution, not just sex work, but so many issues of injustice that people care about, that Christians care about, have everything to do with the way that we shop, because what we support is supporting structures in developing countries. And there's a lot more to it. I feel like that's super simplified, but it's become my passion to see Christians, people who follow Jesus and say they want to see the kingdom of Jesus come on earth, to be passionate about fair trade and to be really wise about how they're spending their money, because I really do believe that the way you spend your money casts a vote for what kind of world you want to live in. One really quick statistic, I went back to Cambodia and I met a woman who works with ladies who work in garment factories, and she found that 60% of women who work in the sex industry in Phnom Penh came from garment factories, because the conditions there were so dehumanizing and they weren't making very much money, that the prospect of working in prostitution instead was really easy and was preferred by a lot of women. And so if we care about sex trafficking, if we care about that sort of exploitation, we have to care about how our clothes are being made. So, long story short, my business, The Simple Kind, we're growing, thankfully. I'm so glad. I've learned so much through this whole process. And I would love to share more with you guys. If you could go to our website and write me an email and we could chat. But this next year we're starting a partnership with some women in Latvia. They have a transition home. It's a YWAM ministry that has a transition home for women coming out of the sex industry there, and they're going to help us sew our dresses, which we're really excited about. And it's really good. It's kind of surreal because it's stuff I've always dreamt of, but it kind of came about just because I laid it down and I gave it to Jesus, and he's been leading. And so if there's anything I could encourage you with, if you have a dream in your heart, is to really trust the Lord, and if he says to wait, and if it's frustrating, just to trust him, because he cares much more about who you are than what you do. And he's really faithful, and it's not our job to change the world, it's his. But if you have a heart to want to bring a positive impact, I think he loves that, and I think he wants to use you to do that. And so be humble before him, and it'll be really good. And I mentioned our website. It's www.thesimpлекindclothing.com. Hope you check it out. Hope you buy our dresses so we can go to Latvia. And thank you so much for listening. Hope it wasn't jumbled or confusing. yeah, if you would like to know more, shoot me an email. There's a contact site or a contact page on our website. We also have an Instagram. Send me a message, whatever. Hope you guys have a great time in DTS, and I look forward to seeing where you go. Bye.